maybe all of you are my family. Well, there's a lot of family here, but not all of them. And it wasn't unusual for them to see me set up at my easel, painting yet again Mountain Lake, during a family barbecue at the beach, or standing on skates on the rink that we just cleared on the lake for the kids. In fact, they did very, very little to help discourage this kind of behavior, which, you know, I think that if someone in my family, well, anyways, I'm trying to help, I think. And I didn't really recognize the sort of the ridiculous nature, I guess, of such an extended undertaking until recently, looking backwards. And I thought, well, just a minute now. Because no one's ever seen these paintings. They're in a box, stored safely, because it's nobody's business. And I thought, well, you know, perhaps there's others who maybe have developed, I don't know, long-term behavioral quirks due to their connection to place, which I think in cottage country specifically, it's nice to go to the cottage and get away from the city and a few bugs and we're roughing it and everything. Oh, that's all very nice when you buy a cabin magazine and you decorate your place. But deep down inside, something very significant is locking you into something you're maybe not fully aware of. I asked a very good friend of mine, Nick, good to see you. Wow. Sorry. I asked a very good friend of mine, a psychoanalyst, Dr. David Dorenbaum, one day, after showing him just a few of them, is this nuts? Of course, you know, that doesn't really get you very far because everyone they talk to is nuts. So they have nothing to compare it to. But he agreed to hold my hand while this rather private story moves out into the public realm. And he wrote a very probing essay for the catalog, which begins to open up some of the symptoms that perhaps others locked to a lake or connected to a place of the heart, which we all tend to do, might recognize. And I think this is the first time I've seen all these paintings. So, yesterday. Alone, so you should come back when the gallery's empty. And just, it's rather strange. It's the first time the doctor, he's with us today, has ever seen all of these paintings together. And maybe he has some further observations, comments that might be useful to all of us. I'd like to introduce Dr. David Dorenbaum.
You might have seen all sorts of exhibitions in this very gallery. You might have gone to other museums or galleries. But to see the same thing 400 times at different moments in a span of entire lives, and to put so close to the site where this was originated, it's overload. No, it's information overload for the senses. So you have to go home and you have to digest what you're experiencing here, and you will see how it starts filtering in your dreams, in your thoughts, in your memories of this exhibition, because it's very difficult to capture something so, it's like pixels of life, you know, all over the place. Now, when we're talking about cottaging, look, I've been in practice as a psychoanalyst. I work in Toronto. I teach at the University of Toronto, and I hear patients' stories all day. And you know, some people come from very wealthy families, some people are homeless, but what I noticed is that when it comes to a crunch, the cottage is where the intensity really resides. People don't mind not inheriting the mansion in Rosedale in Toronto, they don't mind foregoing the bank accounts, but God forbid you split the cottage in two, these families stop talking to each other, you know, and it is incredible the intensity and the emotion that the cottage holds. And I asked myself that question, why? Why is it so rooted in the people's spirits, you know, with memories of childhood, early experiences, the intimacy of very thin walls and conversations one hears. I mean, there's a lot in cottages that really steers very deep aspects of our being, no? So that's something I wanted to say. Now, about this exhibition, I cannot tackle this exhibition in a linear way. I cannot tell you this is insane or not insane. I leave it up to you to decide. Is this weird, you know?
I did ask him.
He asked you.
Is this evidence of insanity? And he said, well, Gord, you're an artist, and I know your work, and everything you do is insane. I thought we were friends.
Yes, but Gord, I come to a conclusion. Insanity is the insistence on meaning. I think that's the insane aspect. When we push and insist on what does this mean, that's when it seems insane. Because when we relate to each of them, or we enter into these moments and exit, there's nothing insane about it. It's almost like a tutorial on our ways of seeing the world, you know? Fragments, sections. We don't see the world in a totality. Even now, you're looking at me, you're really not looking at me, you're looking here, here, and the brain composes the image and creates a wholesomeness, no? So it's very difficult to conceptualize this in a linear way, in a total way. So it is insane to expect to draw meaning from this, and yet it borders on something very strange. Let's face it. This is almost like the only thing that reminds me. I never told you this because you, by the way, Gord was so anxious about preparing for this exhibition. This was so private. This was like even 10 times more intense than showing his own self-portrait of the artist naked. You know, this is a different level of nakedness that really inhibited him. And as I started writing my notes for the catalog, he kept editing them and cutting them and cutting them. And I almost lost a friend here, you know, because he wouldn't let me say.
What he was writing was idiotic. Over and over again. This is rubbish. And I now see that I don't know what was going on, so I apologize. Mr. is a brilliant writer. He writes for important publications, and not each one. And I'm not kidding.
No,
five essays. I said this is rubbish.
Very difficult. In the course of this, I'm desperate, I'm frustrated, I don't know what he wants me to say, but I want to say what I would like to say, but it escapes me. You know, it was almost as if I entered into this universe that you have to repeat and repeat and repeat the essay and you never quite capture it. I was reproducing the phenomenon that he had gone through in the process. And in the midst of that, I discovered a Margaret Atwood short story. Briefly described to you, I'm not very much into Margaret Atwood's writings, but that story, it's called, this should have been the title of this exhibition.
She spent her childhood in Halliburton.
In Halliburton, yes.
Margaret Atwood?
Yes. The title of this story, written in 1990 and published in Harper's Bazaar, an American magazine, it's called Death by Landscape. Death by Landscape. Now, briefly, you should read it. You can access it to Google, Death by Landscape. But Louise is an older lady who retired, whose husband Rob died. She downsizes, sells her home, buys a condo by the lakefront in Toronto, the lakeshore, and has bought over the years small paintings that turned to be very valuable with years. They're a group of 7 paintings. But at the time she paid $5 for each, $7. Now they're worth millions. And she has them in her condo. And we learned that Louise, as a child, used to go to Manitou Camp. And in Manitou Camp, there was a wealthy girl, a friend of hers, Lucy, who came from a wealthy Chicago family. And they were in the camp 2-3 years consecutively, until one day Lucy and her go for a canoe trip. Lucy needs to pee, and Lois gives her privacy, and unfortunately, Lucy disappears. What? Nowhere to be found. She slipped into the lake, or she hit her head, but her body was never found. And we learned that Louis thinks that somewhere in those paintings, her friend is residing. So the attachment she formed to those paintings is so connected by that traumatic early history of a friend who died. And the camp counselor, the director of the camp, almost blamed her for pushing her friend in order to abate the responsibility at camp. So she lived with that sword hanging over her head and embedded the paintings with the presence of the lost friend. So why am I connecting this with this? Because I think in each of these paintings, Gord, there's something missing. There's a lack that you're trying to find a place for. And that's perhaps why the paintings keep happening over and over and over. Because once we capture everything and we resolve it, it's case closed. But it's almost as if they're like a donut or a bagel if you're Jewish, I guess, with a little hole in the center. Each painting has something, they have a lot, but they have something that is lacking, that is missing. And it's like in Lois's collection, you know, that lost friend, it fosters that attachment to the work. There's something here that we're looking for, but we won't find it, so we switch to the next one, and we go to the next one. And there's always a hope to find, to capture the essence of something. And he manages, the artist, in this case, I feel personally, he manages to transmit to us that desire for finding the lack. Because I observed the paintings, and you asked me to come here when there were no people. No, I wanted to see how people relate to these strange objects. And I captured a lot of photographs of how they have sucked us in, almost like a black hole. Partly the scale of them, but it's really interesting to observe the pictures of all of us watching them, how they are like a vacuum that gets us writing. That is a fascinating accomplishment. That's why Gord and I, with this I will finish, we have come to the conclusion that these are really not paintings. They look like paintings. Those that are framed are closer to getting, the frame almost becomes the push towards the painting. There's something else. They are, wow!
And Lily.
The forces were not. Anyway, with that I will finish, and thank you all for being here and supporting a superlative artist who has had a big chunk of his life in this region. Thank you.
And written on it is Jasmine's marriage and a storm. So, I mean, it doesn't say much. Sometimes I write a whole essay and almost obliterate the image, ruin the painting. Other times I say very little. But I mean, for me, Jasmine's marriage, Jasmine, our youngest daughter, decided to get married on the beach at the cottage that she had spent her whole life at, which her father had spent his whole life at, which her father's mother had spent her whole life at that beach. You know, so Jasmine's marriage is how I captured that. And the storm, that day, you wouldn't believe the tables were going sideways, just like I think.
It is a severe storm warning right now.
That tables at Abbey Gardens were going sideways.
The guy
past the window.
Yeah.
So, for me, each one of these is, I don't think they're paintings. There's a lot of truth to that. We decided they're painted panels. We'll leave it at that. And they're certainly not paintings. Because I'm not a painter. And paintings take composition and color theory. And also to have a painter do an exhibition at a gallery, you have to. Oh, are you busy? You have to edit. You can't show the public every single painting. So I'm not a painter. These aren't paintings, and this is not a painting exhibition. So I don't know what this is.
Well, no, it's not she ends the story, she says, and these paintings are not landscape paintings, says Margaret Atwood about Lois's collection. Says, and these paintings are not landscape paintings because there aren't any landscapes up there. Not in the old, tidy European sense, with a gentle hill, a curving river, a cottage, a mountain in the background, a golden evening sky. Instead, there's tangled and receding maze in which you can become lost almost as soon as you step off the path.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, are we supposed to take questions? Would there be
Yes,
questions?
Speaks to what the doctor was saying.
Yes, these are filled with ghosts. I mean, when you've been on a lake for, I think they first came to the property probably 1929, so I guess it's over 90 years. They built a proper cottage in 1934. But they were coming before that. So, you know, and the great aunt that first stole the road crew's cabins, because they're finished with the road crew building Highway 35. They dragged them down, as many families here, I believe, have done, and that's the first part of the cottage. She brought the whole family eventually over from Scotland, one by one, the great aunts and uncles, 11 or 12 or 13 of them, all dirt poor, stupid as a post. That's that's who we are.
Whoa, and Lily.
Stupid enough to buy real estate in Minden in 1934. That kind of stupid. Because we don't have the real estate. So, I mean, you know, I think we were very close till she was 102. We spoke all the time up here. She lived by herself until she died up here. And so there's her, there's my mom, my mom's brothers and sisters, her brothers and sisters, were all could come and go and visit and the ghosts. I mean, then there's Harold Heaven, who's on Mountain Lake. The mystery of Harold Heaven. Ghosts. And I just found a painting where Aunt Lily told me she had a dream about the nurse telling her, why did one boy murder the other boy? Well, she was up here in 1934 when Harold disappeared. Her husband and his brother-in-law worked on the road crew. Maybe they took care of Harold. I don't know. But they, they would be part of that road crew, and the mystery of this disappearance of this man, and no one knows where he is. I think he's buried under Highway 35, maybe. He's in the lake. Ghosts. Time accumulates ghosts.
Both, but also this is interesting. This question of disappearance and ghosts. Perhaps also we could think of these as traces, markings of a moment. Like indexing of a life, so that because the idea of a disappearance without leaving any trace, any remains, any leftovers, like that Air India airplane crash, always mystifies me, because imagine there's the airplane with 500 people above the ocean, then there's a crash, immense noise and explosion. 5 minutes later,
not a trace.
Not a trace. As if nothing happened. And that's the horrific, the notion of the erasure of a trace. So here, I guess the confluence of image and words, almost markings, the trace, the diary element of wanting to bear witness to the existence of a moment, I think is very interesting in connection with the ghosts that have such a immateriality and evanescence. And they appear without trace.
And appear with trace. I mean, we entered the cottage a couple days ago. She's been dead since 1997. Open the cottage up.
Smells like her.
That's her smell. How is that possible? How can smell linger so long in a cottage? And it does. It smells like our great Aunt Lily. And then also Brody, our other daughter. My dad came by to visit when she was up with some girlfriends. I mean, we take it as a matter of fact. Yeah, that was my dad, and she told me what happened, and I thought, yeah, that was Dad for sure.
Of course, this was after he was gone. It was after he died, just to be clear.
After he died, yes. Sorry.
Somebody else wanted to ask a question.
Thanks, Gord, for opening up yourself to us in this way. I would say you come from a great school of artists, a tradition of artists who have done, not quite to this extent, but Matisse went to an apartment in Nice and painted the same painting over and over again. But that was only once. Monet created the garden so he could paint it over and over and over again.
Or Cézanne, the haystacks.
Yeah, and Whistler painted the Thames River over and over
Yes.
again. So you come from a great tradition. So congratulations on that. I would like to give a different thesis to this, and that as opposed to there's something missing, that every one of these is a complete whole, because everyone says this is now.
Yeah.
And so every time you do another painting, it's a completely different painting because it's another now. So it's not, there's nothing missing. There's 400 nows here. And please keep doing it.
That's very interesting. I like it. It's almost like, you make me think it's almost like a theater. That it may be a play written in the past, or it may be about the future. But it's always about the present, because it's always happening now. I like that.
It's very much like